Mine is or yours is? I'm sure.
I think you can swivel them around and they pop up.
I apologize, I did not realize. The time, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Those,
What's this?
you on?
Did you read the last one? I used to see if these two will put the word to say they've been changed. Last month, they passed on first reading the ordinance. It's not on the it's not a public record.
I have a problem here, it was number 5.
So I don't know whether this ordinance matches last week or not.
The light was bright, but come on, I haven't done anybody, first I'm late, then I can't turn the machine on. My phone is live.
One of those, no, I turned them all on, yeah. That looks like we're all right.
Yes, what's up here?
We're good to go.
Ready?
Yes.
Let's call the special meeting to order. Please stand and pledge the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Gainer, Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner White, Commissioner Orthwine,
Here.
Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Let the record show that the town manager and the town attorney are absent with notice.
A special meeting is called for the second reading and readoption of ordinance 14/2. Rita, would you please read?
We have the first. Ordinance 14/2, an ordinance of the Town Commission, the Town of Gulfstream, Palm Beach County, Florida, providing an amendment to Chapter 66 zoning, Article 1, in general to include a new section, Section 66-11, providing for reasonable accommodation procedures pursuant to the Fair Housing Amendments Act and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, providing for severability, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict, providing for codification, and providing for an effective date. It was passed and adopted in a regular adjourned session on the first reading this 13th day of June 2014, and for a second and final reading and readoption on this first day of July 2014.
Thank you, Rita. Any comments or observations by commission? Any comments by the public?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris O'Hare. I made a public record request to the town for any readily available records that would help me speak publicly and informatively about this agenda item, but my request is unfulfilled. I'll do my best, though. This ordinance was adopted on first reading as an emergency ordinance. I was trying to figure out what emergency exists that would allow for this ordinance to qualify to be exempt from statutory notice requirements. I just didn't know what the emergency was. Then I remembered at the last meeting, Mr. Randolph said, "It is my recommendation so as not to cause any unnecessary delays to anyone wishing to avail themselves of a reasonable accommodation that this ordinance be adopted today on one reading as an emergency ordinance." So the emergency is not to cause any unnecessary delay for a disabled person. However, according to the procedure timetable outlined in Section 4, 45 days are allowed for Mr. Thrasher to rule if a disabled person is worthy of a reasonable accommodation. 15 days are added if more information is needed. 30 days more for a decision to be made or mailed. Section 6 tells us a disabled person has 30 days to ask for relief, 30 days to possibly wait for the next scheduled commission meeting, and 60 days for the commission to rule if a disabled person is worthy of reasonable accommodation. 210 days, 7 months. A disabled person trying to buy a home can't possibly wait that long for a decision. No home seller will agree to anyone to any more than a 30-day due diligence period. Mr. Randolph has previously stated, paragraph 5 are things that need to be shown in order to establish a disability. That's exactly what it says. The disabled individual must show a physical or mental impairment. Can't visualize that. A record of having such impairment, or that any are regarded as having such impairment. Next, the disabled person will have to demonstrate that the proposed accommodations being sought are reasonable and necessary. And this is important because this shall be the basis for a decision in the event of an appeal. In other words, the disabled must prove to the town that they are disabled, prove to the town that they actually need reasonable accommodations for that particular disability. How do they do that? Will the town's own doctor need to examine them to verify the disability? Let's hope not. The disabled person will need to produce medical records. At the last meeting, Mr. Randolph said, and I quote, "There is a provision in the ordinance that medical records will be protected." That's not true. Section 3 actually says, "The town will cooperate with a disabled individual in actions initiated by that individual to oppose disclosure of medical records, but the town shall have no obligation to initiate, prosecute, or pursue any such action or to incur any legal or other expense." This puts the burden squarely on the disabled person to protect their medical records. And once disclosed to the town or considered in a public meeting, state records law makes that impossible. Disclosure will be mandatory. In summary, a disabled person will have to prove in public that she has a disability. A disabled person will have to prove in public that her infirmity warrants the sought-after accommodation. A disabled person may have to endure a public meeting where her infirmity will be on review. A disabled person will get no help from the town to keep her medical records private. They will be subject to public records law. A disabled person may wait up to 210 days or 7 months to find out if her disability is recognized by the town of Gulfstream. Mr. Randolph says this ordinance is an emergency so as not to cause any unnecessary delays to anyone wishing to avail themselves of requests for reasonable accommodations. But then he wrote an awful and anti-disability ordinance that does just the opposite and adds a hefty dose of humiliation as well. And I just wanted you to ask yourself, isn't it enough of a burden to a disabled person without having to be subject to these delays and humiliations? Would you want anyone's mother to be subject to that? Would you want your own mother to have to go through that in order to put a handicap ramp? Or so maybe a bigger bathroom that maybe goes a little bit over a property line? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. Any other comments from the public? Commission? Is there a motion for adoption?
Make a motion to adopt ordinance number 14-2 as stated by the clerk.
I'll second it.
Just for clarification, readoption.
Readoption.
Rita?
Commissioner Ganger,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwein,
Yes.
Mayor Moore.
Yes. Anything else? If not, we are adjourned.
Nice meeting. Short meeting.
Vacation point?
No, thank goodness it was raining. I would have been upset. I'm embarrassed to tell you.
It beats the old one.
I'm embarrassed to tell you how often I play. I said I'm embarrassed to tell you.